Every time I look into your eyes, I see the future.
So this is gonna be like a short video just on like snare roll masterclass. So everything I know and I use in my tracks for snare rolls. So let's get started. And this is a track that I'm currently working on. So I'm gonna play like the build up for you guys, and this is where I'm gonna be putting in the snare roll. I already kind of had one that I was testing out, but I'm gonna remake it from scratch. So let's listen. Cool, so this is where the snare roll is going to go. This is kind of like the tail end of the build up, the last 8 rolls. So every time I'm doing a snare roll, what I usually do is I make a new MIDI channel. And I could probably automate this so that it's a lot faster, but I'm going to show it to you from scratch. So insert new MIDI track. And I like to do my snare rolls in, not with audio, with MIDI. So what I'll do is I'll put in a simpler here. And with the simpler, I'm going to look for a snare sample. So this one's pretty good. So let's pick this snare. So I'll drag it in here. You can shape this sound how you would want. So you can use the one-shot mode and use the fade out to kind of shape the sound. So let's solo this for now. And the next important step in making a snare roll is to figure out like what pattern you want. So for tech house, the most common thing you hear will be like a 16th note. So you can change the grid to 16th notes and just start drawing. And you want to keep this on C3 because C3 is going to be the initial kind of root sound of the sample you picked. If you go up, you're going to start pitching it up. So I'll kind of show you guys what that sounds like. So not necessarily an effect you don't want, but just if you want the initial sound, you can do that. So we have 16th notes here, and when someone's playing a snare roll on a real drum, they're not going to hit every note with the same volume. And so what I like to do is use the velocity right here for the MIDI notes to kind of create some movement with the volume. So there's more dynamics in my snare roll. So, you know, the classic that I kind of do is have the first one be a little bit louder than the second. Or you can do something more complicated, like maybe you have the velocity go down and then all the way back up, or, you know, this one's a little bit less quiet than the first one. It's totally up to you how to do this, but this is definitely something I would play around with to give your snare rolls a little bit more movement. So I'll kind of solo the difference of what it sounds like. It's pretty subtle, but you can kind of hear, if I bring this down a lot more, you'll definitely notice it. That there's more dynamic movement in the first half. Right, so that's one parameter that you can start to think of. So let's say we want to stick with this one. Bring this up a little bit. So this can be like the foundation of our snare roll. And then, you know, maybe we want to add a couple additional notes here and there. So if I'm feeling funky and there's room in the build up, and what I mean by room is if there's a lot going on, maybe you don't want your snare roll to do all these crazy patterns because there's already a lot going on with the build-up. If there's not much going on, then your listener is going to be more focused on the snare roll, and you can start to do some more stuff. So, you know, easy stuff is maybe adding a couple extra notes here and there. So like maybe over here, let's change this grid to narrow. Yeah, you can have 4 hits or something. Little snare roll. You can do triplet notes, so you can do something like this. And then it would kind of continue there. You don't hear that in tech house that much. You can go up on the notes right here, so you can maybe go like do a little snare roll like this. That one sounds a little bit weird. It's kind of nice. It's almost like a melody, like da 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 da. You can delete notes. You know, you can do it randomly. You can kind of do whatever you want here. So this is totally up to you. But it's also totally fine to just have like 16th notes. You usually won't hear anything slower than 16th notes in tech house. That generally you hear more in like mainstream EDM, like put your fucking hands up, like some bullshit like that. Not bullshit, but you know what I mean. And all right, so you got your 16th notes. A couple other things that I like to do with the snare roll. So I definitely always have an EQ8 on here, just because maybe there's a lot of other high frequency stuff going on in the build up, so I want to maybe tame the highs of the snare, or maybe I want to like boost a certain area or cut out the lows. So an EQ is always great to have on here. A couple other cool things. So filters sound really good as well. So let me throw on a auto filter. So sometimes you don't want your snare roll to come in like fully open with the frequencies. You kind of want to dull it out a little bit. So let's listen how it comes in now. So it sounds okay, but I bet you if we could take this filter and start it filtered out, use this as a way to create movement in your snare roll so that it's slowly growing as opposed to staying open the entire time. So now let's listen. So you can kind of hear it's more subtle, but it's growing right before that drop, so it's really helping to build up the energy. Feel free to add a little bit of resonance as well, so that when the filter moves, it kind of highlights the frequency that it's on. That's what this resonance knob would do. One other thing I forgot to mention here is right now there's no swing on this because I kind of programmed these notes in automatically. So if you wanted to add a bit of swing, you could take your clip, you can go to the groove pool. This is Ableton 11, but if you were on Ableton 10, it's like kind of in the same area. And you can listen to different swings here. I like these swing 16ths, so it's like, say we like that one, double click it, and we could apply it to the MIDI by using this arrow, or we could just leave it on. So if we apply it, you'll see it moved a lot of those notes off the grid. It was right here before, and now it's over there. So if we listen, a lot more swing, a lot more funky and groovy. So I definitely like adding groove to my snare roll. So the other effect I like to add is, this is a low pass filter, meaning that we're gonna take away the highs initially and then let those in, only letting the lows pass. This is gonna be a high pass filter, so if we just click right here, we can make this a high pass. And this is really great if you kind of want your snare roll to naturally end with the buildup of your song. So let's listen. I don't know if you caught that, but kind of fizzles out, right? So that's a nice little effect. You don't always have to use it, but it's just a good tool to have. So I usually have these two filters on, an EQ. A couple other cool effects are vocoders. So in Ableton, you have this vocoder, and I won't really get into what a vocoder is exactly, but the way you would set this up is you want the carrier to be noise. So this is going to bring in white noise. And then think of this kind of like an EQ, like a frequency graph. So this is the volume on the Y, is this the Y-axis? And then this is the X-axis. And so we can, only allow the high frequencies in, or let's say like the mid frequencies. And let's say we want to make this range 20 to 18,000 hertz. So if we listen to the snare roll and we bring the dry wet 100% up, so you can kind of see how these bands correlate with certain frequencies. So the cool thing you can do with this is you can use this dry wet to bring in this noise layer on top of your original sound. And it's just another way to create some movement in your snare rolls. So let's automate this dry wet, and let's draw a little line bringing this up, and you'll hear the change it makes. So you can see the snare part of it goes away, and we just kind of get that white noise. I would say 100% is a little bit too much in this case. Maybe let's add a little bit more lows. And you also have this formant knob, which is the formant of the vocoder, so it kind of acts like a pitch knob. So if we pitch this up, you can start to hear that the noise layer is actually being pitched up. So that's another way that we can create movement in the snare roll. So let's turn this vocoder off. I'm going to show you guys a couple more things. So the envelope is another place where you can pitch bend your snare roll. So maybe this is something my friend Noizu does, at least he has done in his past songs, is he'll have the snare roll in this little fill section right before the drop where everything kind of goes away. He'll keep the snare roll, but he'll start to pitch it down. So let's say we draw, this is your pitch envelope. So this is different than automation because this is part of the clip itself. So it's always going to be in this clip. It's not really on the timeline like this is on the timeline. So let's say we bring this down, pitch it down, and let's hear how this sounds. So you can kind of hear it pitch down over there. You can pitch it up. Let's see that. So it's a nice way to just change your snare roll in that little pocket before the drop. Or you could have it end beforehand. I think that's pretty much it in terms of snare rolls. Any type of effect like reverb or if you're using a plugin like Endless Smile that kind of has reverb and delay built into it, this can also sound pretty nice on a snare roll. So it's really great for building that energy. I wouldn't bring the intensity up too much because what happens is you start to lose the initial punch of your snare, which can make it sound a little bit thin. So you can always think about doing this effect maybe on a send channel, so you still have your original snare and you maybe send this to a send. But yeah, any type of effect like that you would maybe use to make a sound like glitchy or cool, like a flanger or like a delay, like those can all sound good on the snare roll. It's a pretty hearty sound in the sense that it can take a lot of effects and it won't necessarily sound weird because it's such a simple kind of sound initially to start with. So yeah, definitely get creative with this stuff. But once you I would first try to figure out the pattern that you like and the swing that you like, and the most importantly, what snare sample you want to use. And then once you kind of have that down, look at the rest of your build-up and be like, okay, is the rest of the build-up boring? Maybe I'll add some more fluff to the snare roll. But there's a ton of amazing songs where the snare roll is no effects on it and it's just kind of there and it works. So it really depends on what's going for your track. But hope you found this helpful and have a good one. See ya.